Yo, what's up guys, GNSX here, and today I am back with a sort of different type of video after a 2 month hiatus, and it's kind of a draft league analysis video where I would talk about like sort of the team building and the framework of team building and how to team build behind Pokemon Draft League. So one thing I've noticed lately is that because the community has been kind of dying out with GBA not being as popular as before, and a lot of new players not being able to get into the large community such as MPL or even Hive that easily. A lot of new players aren't that experienced in this sort of format, and kind of want to make this video to introduce sort of like how to build for Draft League format. And even though I'm probably not like the best ever player to build, I do feel like I have an insight on Draft League, and I feel like I'll probably be one of the better people to sort of introduce the differences between Smogon and Draft League, considering that I converted from Smogon to Draft League before, and that the team building between the two is very different. Because, at least in my personal opinion, when you play a game of Pokemon, the main fundamentals stay the same when you play during the game, such as analyzing your win conditions and preserving your threats, and maybe even prediction and sort of like the gameplay, sort of like how you would play the game out. That would stay the same between Draft League and Smogon. However, one of the main differences between them is going to be the team building, because in Smogon singles you have this sort of wide metagame where you have to build you have to build a team of 6 where you can cover for every Pokemon in the metagame, or at least 70 to 80% of the metagame, and especially Pokemon that are viable currently, such as Heatran and even Lando, and such as Magirner and Ashman Ninja and stuff such as that. So what differs from Draft League and Smogon singles is that in Draft League you have to sort of set 11 mons, and you're able to adjust your team in a way where they're only like they deal best against your opponent's 11/8 mons, and that is the main difference between the two Smogon singles and Draft League format. Because the common mistake that I see a lot of people make, or people new to Draft League make, is that they just copy sets off the Smogon forums and think that they're viable and that they're good. And of course, if you're a good player, you can definitely make these sets work because they're designed to be able to counter like all different sorts of sets. However, in the Draft League format, your opponent and you have this sort of insight on what your opponents might be able to bring and what you can bring to counter what they're going to bring. Therefore, your opponents can build sets that are specifically like counter your Pokemon, such as lures, and even like unconventional sets that are able to beat your team, whereas a common Smogon set would not. A great example of this would be something like a hidden power flying Mamoswine to deal with a Buzzwole. Like, that is a definition of a lure that you will not see in regular metagames, but you will definitely see being viable if your opponent has a Buzzwole and you have a Mamoswine in Draft League format. Therefore, one of the most important things I believe in Pokemon Draft League team building is that you're able to analyze your opponent's threats and be able to determine what your best 6 are to bring vs your opponents, and sort of like you also have to be able to make sort of like lures, and the EVs and speed creeping are also different in terms of Smogon singles and Draft League. And I'll also be going over such as like what is necessary and what is not necessary, because a lot of people believe that everything that's Stealth Rocks, Hazard, Removal, Knockoff, Phasing, Taunt, everything is like sort of necessary in the team, whereas it really isn't when you go into Draft League, because you're able to have the insight on your opponent's 6 Pokemon, or your opponent's potential 11 Pokemon, so you're able to like specify your team much more to be able to deal with your opponent's threats compared to Smogon singles. So the first thing that I would like to go into is this sort of like team building, and I'm gonna give a few examples of this as well. As you can see, I have sort of like a lot of teams I have ready to show you, and the main thing that I want to say is analyze your opponent's threats, or analyze your opponent's threats and analyze your threats against your opponent. That's definitely the most important thing in Draft League, because in Smogon, you have to cover for a lot of Pokemon, 50 to 60, and you're using sets that are designed to be able to deal with all these Pokemon. However, in Draft League, you're able to look at your opponent's team and just look and see what is good against them and what is bad against them. So let's hop straight into it. So the first example I'm going to give is actually a match that I just had this morning, and it's going to be against me and Ace of Games in League Dependency run by Hiker and John. And the first thing that I noticed when I looked at this matchup is that every Pokemon on Ace's team is grounded. So you might be thinking, well, if everything on Ace's team is grounded, then how can you capitalize on that? So here's the thing. I have a Klefki on my team and I have a Landorus on my team. Both good hazard setters. And because every Pokemon on Ace's team is grounded except for Exo Valley Flying, Spikes is able to destroy Ace. So that is the main thing that I wanted to build around in this sort of matchup. And as you can see here, I have a Spikes Klefki, and pretty much the main idea that I had when building was that, okay, Spikes destroy Ace's team, so I want to build a team around Spikes and build mons that can capitalize around Spikes. And the first thing that jumped into my mind was wall breakers. Because if you look at Ace's team and look at my team, my main wall breakers consist of Landorus, Kartana, and Mega Medicham. And he has no fighting resist outside of Victini and Gardevoir, which aren't very good fighting resist except for the Gardevoir, but Victini takes like 50 from HJK, and it's also weak to rocks, so I'm not counting that as a fighting resist. But yeah, so Ace has no fighting resist and all of his teams are grounded, or he has limited fighting resist. So what I can do in this matchup is set up Spikes early on in the game and sort of pressure Ace consistently throughout the match with my wall breakers to force him to switch around, and therefore I can gain momentum and just clean up the game with something like a Kartana or a Raikou. So that is the mentality I had going into this game and like building around it. So you definitely want to have that sort of like game plan in your head before you set into the game, and that's what good team building does. Like if you look at my team here, here's my team, right? So you have Spikes, Klefki, and Fairy Lock. I'll get into Fairy Lock later, but Thunderwave, Klefki, and that's pretty much to support my entire team, because Thunderwave can cripple stuff such as Victini and Gardevoir and Superior, and that allows my Pokemon such as Medicham and Landorus just to run rampage against him. Spikes, as I said before, pretty much destroys his entire team. And after I finish the Klefki set, I move on to my wall breakers. So as you can see, I have a Zen, Headbutt, Rock Slide, High Jump Kick, and Recover Medicham. So I want to keep Medicham healthy throughout the game, which is why I have Recover, and I can definitely recover on stuff like Goodra and Beware and Blissey, because you won't want to keep them in against a Medicham. Therefore, I'm able to pressure them with my dual stab and force them to consistently switch. And then I also have a Landorus with Momentum as well. Momentum also is great against teams that are weak to hazards, because you're constantly able to get in your threats and just force them to switch out. So like I said, I'm pretty much just repeating myself at this point, but I really want to make it clear that you want to be able to analyze your opponent's threats, or not analyze your opponent's threats, but analyze what's good against them on your team and be able to capitalize on that and build around that in this sort of draft league matchup. So the next thing that I wanted to consider when building in this matchup is that I want a Pokemon that can switch in on his main wall breakers. And as you can see, its main wall breakers are going to be Victini, Mega Gardevoir, and Crawdon. So, and possibly Superior. It's more like a cleaner than a Superior, but so the first Pokemon that I saw, okay, both Gardevoir and Superior and Victini are like mainly special attackers, except for like Victini, but that's beside the case. But the mon that I wanted on this team the most as this sort of like defensive backbone is going to be Avian Incineroar, because I was like, okay, Hyper Voice does around 20 to 30 if he's max special attack against this Incineroar, and Superior cannot touch this Incineroar at all, and Victini is weak to the Incineroar. Like both stabs of Victini cannot touch the Incineroar, and therefore I was like, okay, Incineroar is definitely going to be the main backbone of my team. And as you can see here, it pretty much just deals against this team extremely well, especially his main attackers. And then my cleaner is going to be my Kartana over here. So I have a speed boosting timid Kartana that serves the function to be able to clean up the game. At +2, and Z Smart Strike is able to KO everything on his team, or not everything, but like majority of his team, except for like Steelix. And with Hazards up, this is able to completely obliterate Ace's team, and it functions as a really nice cleaning option against him. Therefore, this sort of like archetype is what I feel like every player should have in mind when building, is that build around the specific thing that your opponent is weak to, or build around a specific duo that your opponent is weak to. Therefore, you can capitalize on that the most, and you're able to form this sort of game plan before you head into battle. So let us hop into this like battle. I'm just going to go over this really simply. So as you can see, I lead off with my Incineroar because it gets Intimidate off on every single team. Here goes my low tick, I go for U-turn, I get in my Clef Key, and I'm able to spike up 2 layers. And right here, I go into my Medicham expecting him to go for Stealth Rocks, but that doesn't work out, and I'm kind of forced to go for HJK. But as you can see, his main switch is going to have to be Gardevoir. And because he had to switch his Gardevoir in, instead of only taking 28%, he's taken 44% instead with his Gardevoir, and he's forced to Wish Up. And therefore, what I can do here is I can U-turn, and I can take advantage of his Wish opportunity to set up rocks with my Landorus. So as you can see here, Hazards plus Momentum is great. On turn 8, I'm already pretty much got all my hazards up, and as you can see, everything on this team is grounded. So I'm really looking good in this position, at least in this case. And therefore, I'm also able to pretty much kill off the Blissey here with a Iron Tail from my Landorus. I go into my Raikou, I Volt Switch out. As you can see, again, I Volt Switch on his walls, and I'm able to get in my Wall Breakers. And as you can see, he's constantly switching his Goodra in. He took 65% from hazards only. And hazards plus a 12% Volt Switch only. That's the power of like hazards in this matchup. It's because if my opponent were to have a lot of flying Pokemon, Spikes would definitely not be ideal. But in this case, if you analyze your opponent's strat correctly, everything pretty much went as how I expected it would go in my mind. And therefore, that is probably that is definitely the best sort of like team building scenario that you can have in a matchup like this. So I'm just going to let the game run down and recover on his Protect, and I'm able to, as you can see, Victini takes 49% from High Jump Kick and goes to 10. Like, even though his resists are resisting my High Jump Kick, he takes 90% in one turn. Like, it's the power of hazards against his team is just incredible. So, as you can see, my defensive backbone Incineroar takes 44% from a all-out pummeling from Victini. That I actually thought that Z Focus Blast would do more to me, but Incineroar was a fucking beast. So, alright, so I'm able to take out the Victini due to the hazards and prevent him from switching in. And right here, I'm pretty much able to just win the game because he has nothing to do with my offense, and the only thing remaining for him is walls, and he has no offensive capabilities at all, and all my wall breakers still remain intact. So this is a great example of how analyzing your opponent's threats can be great, and forming a game plan before you go into battle is essential, or not essential, but like but really necessary in terms of like forming a good team. And you want to be able to build around something that is good against your opponent. So moving on here, we have another example here, and let's see here. We have an example in Blitz. Okay, so here's another example where I look at the matchup and I'm like, okay, what is good against my opponent's team? And in this case, it's more like a sort of unconventional set demonstration in terms of like the difference between Smogon and Draft League. Because normally in this sort of matchup for a new sort of player, they wouldn't think of bringing stuff such as I don't know, Power Trip Incineroar against this matchup, because that's not commonly seen in OU or any lower tier like RU. So the first thing that I noticed when I look at this matchup is, what is his threats against my team? I mean, what is his defensive and offensive threats against my team? And the first thing I noticed was like Cresselia completely destroys my offensive capabilities. It walls pretty much both Landorus and Medicham. Of course, Landorus can go for the knockoff, but it's still weak to Ice Beam, and it has no recovery. And if I use Life Orb, it's going to be taking Life Orb chip from knockoff because it's not boosted by sheer force. So that is something I noticed straight away. And the first thing that popped into my mind was that how can I take advantage of the Cresselia? So a normal player would be like, okay, I can just double into Incineroar on the Cresselia and I can get off a U-turn. However, in this case, that's really not what you want, because he has a Diancie, meaning that hazard setting is going to be extremely difficult. And he can also sweep me with a Dragonite. Therefore, I want to be able to sort of not get momentum, but be able to create a huge dent into his team as straight away, as fast as possible, because his team offense is so good vs me, and his Cresselia is so good against my offense. There's no way I'm able to break past his team just by gaining momentum and like U-turning around. And furthermore, he has a Diancie that can prevent me from setting up hazards easily. So the first thing that hopped into my mind was, okay, I can go for a sub baton pass Medicham strategy into the Incineroar. And how can I take advantage of this with Incineroar? Bulk up Power Trip. If you look at Blizz's team, everything is weak to dark except for Diancie. Or everything is neutral or weak to dark except for Diancie. Meaning that Power Trip at +2 attack, +2 defense pretty much just destroys everything on Blizz's team. And if I'm able to pass a substitute into my Incineroar on the Cresselia, then I get a free opportunity to get up 2 bulk ups behind the sub. And he's forced to go to something like Poliswine or Arcanine to go for close combat or Earthquake to take me out. Therefore, my main mentality when building this team was, okay, how can I support just sort of a core between bulk up Power Trip Incineroar and substitute Medicham? The second thing I sort of was, okay, since I have a substitute baton pass Medicham anyways, I might as well have more abusers against his team. And the second thing I sort of was Belly Drum Snorlax. So as you look at his team is also extremely weak to the coverage of Return and Earthquake, especially at +6. But here's the thing. If I go for Belly Drum, then Snorlax is going to be extremely weakened. Therefore, it can only get off around like 2 hits with its berry gone. Because with Snorlax's slow speed stat, he is able to go into something like Arcanine and close combat me, sack it off, go to Dragonite, and Z-move and kill me, or something along those lines. Therefore, I want to be able to prevent this from happening. And I also want to be able to prevent Golbat from whirlwinding my Belly Drum Lax out when I go for the Belly Drum. Therefore, I think that I sort of was a recycle Papa set to be able to like heal back up to full and have multiple opportunities to set up Belly Drum in the future and just cripple away at his team. Kartana is also a abuser, even though he has Diancie, which outspeeds, and a great wall against Kartana and Arcanine. I'm also able to take advantage of that behind the sub. And here we have a Shucker Klefki. It served as my main switch into Diancie. Again, you want to have main switch-ins to every offensive threats on his team. And then here we have a utility Stealth Rock to Landorus, because Stealth Rocks is always good against a team with Dragonite. So I'm not going to go too in-depth, I'm just going to hop straight into the battle. As you can see, he has Cresselia in his first slot, which means that that's going to be his main switch into my Medicham. Lead off with my Kartana expecting the Poliswine because he wants to get up rocks ASAP. Go into my Klefki, go into my Landorus. U-turn, again momentum into my Medicham. I force him out, I go for the substitute on the Cresselia. Now I'm able to baton pass into Incineroar just like how I planned in pre-game, and when I was team building. So here I'm able to go for bulk up, flame charge, 3 flame charge guarantees that I outspeed a non-Scarf Jolteon, and I'm able to take out everything on his team with a Power Trip Incineroar. So one thing that is really important during prep is don't be afraid to try new sets. Like a lot of lures and unconventional sets are based out of creativity and your own imagination. Because if you just stick to regular sets, it's gonna become predictable, at least in my opinion. Of course, you don't want to go crazy with lures. You don't want to bring stuff like Crunch Mega Manectric for a Goldberg. Like that's not viable. So you want to be able to think of lures that are good for your team in this case, because what the definition of lures is to have a Pokemon that is able to beat its check/counter and open up holes for your teammates greatly. And this is what I'm going to hop into next. So my next topic is going to be lures that you can bring against your opponent. So what I've covered thus far is that analyze what is good against your opposition's team, and analyze what sort of defensive capabilities that your opposition has that you can take advantage of, or in this case, abuse. So Another thing that you want to also keep in mind is that you can definitely set like sort of like a pre-6-mon team that you think your opponent's going to bring, and that sort of gives you like a basic framework and what you can bring to counter these 6-mons. I don't really do that because I feel like that limits my opportunities in terms of like what I should prep for, and I don't want to be under prepped for a mon that I didn't expect. Therefore, I don't really do that. However, that is definitely a viable strategy, and I know many good players also do that as well. Moving on, here we have this sort of a topic about lures. So a great example of a lure is something like a team with Mammal Swine and Megalopony against something like a Buzzwole, where you bring something like a HP flying Mammal Swine to be able to beat the Buzzwole. Or not beat, but like severely weaken the Buzzwole to put it in range of 2 returns from a Megalopony. Now that's the definition of a lure regularly. And the importance of lures in draft league format is to be able to, for you to beat your opponent's either offensive checks or the defensive counters, and to be able to open holes for your own team. An example of an offensive lure is what I just stated, being HP Flying Mammal Swine, and an example of a defensive lure is something like a Chople counter Blissey. Let's take that for example. Let's say you're facing against a Megalopony and you bring a Chople counter Blissey, and you're able to defeat the Lopunny, and that means that your entire team is able to go ham against your opponent because the Lopunny is down and he can't revenge anything on your team. So those are examples of lures, and I'm going to go over a few lures that I like to bring in terms of I previously bought in my matchups in many games. So as you can see, I'm using my sort of like my latest builds because that's what I have that's what I'm most familiar to. So bear with me here. So as you can see, I'm going to be using my quarterfinal example against Rice Pool in B and Hive B division. And as you can see, I have a musical B Vaporeon and I'm kind of like spoiling my results for my B run, but that's beside the case. So, as you can see here, if you look at Risepool's team, he has no HJK resist outside of Buzzwole, Amoonguss, and Jettisons. Actually, that's a lot of resist and Gardevoir, but that's beside the point. But, okay, so the first thing that popped into my mind is that he's definitely going to be using either Amoonguss or Buzzwole in his build to be able to counter my Mienshao. And therefore, I was like, okay, Mienshao usually would be a bad pick in this scenario, but however, there's this specific set that I feel like can do really well against his team, and that is what I bought, which is being the substitute acrobatics Sadak Berry Source Dance Mienshao. So the inspiration behind this set is the ability that +2 acrobatics is actually able to OHKO Gardevoir, Amoonguss, Buzzwole, and 2-hit KO Jettison, and I don't even expect him to bring Jettison against my team. So what this achieves here is that if I'm able to take out the Amoonguss, let's say, on Risepool's team, then my Vaporeon with Toxic is able to absolutely demolish him, because he has no toxic immunities outside of Kartana, which takes like 10 million from Scald and does not appreciate the burn. So that was the main idea behind the set. And as you can see, I also have a lot of other lures on my team, being Signal Beam, Vaporeon. The main reason I bought Signal Beam Vaporeon was because I expected him to bring Taunt Greninja, and Signal Beam is a guaranteed 2-hit KO on no HP investment Greninja, which is why I bought it. But as you can see, Cobra Berry Metagross, another example of a more common sort of lure that you bring. Yeah, I might as well go over berries in this case. Berries are a really fundamental part of Pokemon Draft League, and they're definitely not something you see every day in Smogon. Super effective berries are extremely important in Pokemon. They allow Pokemon that are usually weak to another Pokemon to be able to capitalize on them. So in this case, he has a Kartana, which his main way of dealing with Metagross is going to be knockoff, and at +2 normally knockoff just destroys Metagross. However, in this case, Cobra Berry allows me to tank the knockoff and pretty much just revenge back with a Hidden Power Fire. So berries are really crucial in Pokemon Draft League. There are even cases where obvious berries will be bought and I have to play around them. Like, there are cases where I know my opponent has a Magnezone and I cannot go for Earth Power with a Mega Diancie against it, even though I know it's not Scarf, because I know for a fact that it's going to be Shuka and that I'm going to die upon attacking it. So be able to realize like what sorts of set your opponent is most likely going to bring is also important, but that's sort of like another more advanced stage of team building, which I'm not going to get into too deeply in this video. So as you can see here, I'm going to hop straight into the match, and I lead off with my Rotom. I know for a fact that his Heatran is going to be Stealth Rocks, because that's his only rocker that he brought on his team out of his 6. And because I've had Dragonite and a Houndoom, there's no way he's not going to bring a rocker, which is why I know my speed gripping Rotom is faster than his Heatran. And I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity and go into Mienshao, because he probably thinks that he can have rocks for free, which I do believe which is the case. So as you can see, everything that you plan beforehand, if it goes according to what you planned when team building, that means you've built a good team. So right here, I'm able to go for the substitute, Swords Dance up a few times, and Acrobatics take out the Moongus. Now, have I went for the Reckless High Jump Kick route on this Mienshao, which in this case would be changing Drain Punch to High Jump Kick and changing Regenerator to Reckless, I could have swept him right here, sorry about that. I could have definitely swept Rice Pool right here with a High Jump Kick Mienshao. But the reason I didn't do that is because, okay, the main thing I want to think was, okay, if I were to bring the Mienshao, the first set that my opponent would probably expect is the Scarf Mienshao. Therefore, he most likely, or not most likely, but he definitely has the potential to bring Protect on his Heatran. Therefore, if my only fighting move is going to be High Jump Kick on my Mienshao, and he takes advantage of that with Protect on Heatran, then I'm kind of screwed. So I decided to go for a more like a defensive bring instead, being Regenerator and Drain Punch, because even when his Mandibuzz is weakened, I'm still able to clean up his team with everything, with Drain Punch and Acrobatics. However, if his Mienshao isn't weakened, I'm able to switch out, gain 33% health recovery, and I'm able to Swords Dance and Drain Punch later into the game. Another thing that's cool about this set is that if I switch out, I still lose my item, meaning that my Acrobatics is still boosted, so that I can still hit stuff such as Buzzwole later in the game. So as you can see, this set does really well, and later on in the game, I'm able to use my Signal Beam Vaporeon to clean up the game against the Greninja, and he pretty much can't break my Wall Core anymore due to the fact that he lost his Regenerator and his pivot against my Vaporeon, and I'm able to pull off a few doubles and just pretty much destroy and dismantle his team from there. By the way, you probably noticed as well that I also had a Stroke Chop Houndoom against his Mega Gardevoir, which is also a pretty cool tech. Stroke Chop is definitely something that you can consider as well if you're facing something like Gardevoir and Sylveon. However, you have to be careful because some people can expect stuff such as Stroke Chop Weavile and bring a Moonblast Sylveon specifically to prepare against Stroke Chop Weavile. So yeah, so that's definitely another thing that you can consider when team building, is that what sorts of lure are like kind of popularized and obvious in this metagame of Draft League, and what sort of counters your opponent can bring to expect these sort of lures. Moving on, I do kind of want to talk about this sort of idea of I do want to talk about another like lure that I also brought, and how it's able to capitalize on like your opponent's team. So in this case, I was batting Money Guy, and the lure that I brought was Weakness Policy Raikou. So if you look at the teams closely, you're able to see that Money Guy, his main counter to my Raikou is going to be his AV Tangrowth, and there's no reason for him not to bring AV Tangrowth on his team. It helps beat my Raikou, helps beat my Snorlax, it helps beat my Landorus, and it even helps me as my Kartana. So AV Tangrowth was definitely something that I expected on his team. So what I brought was a Weakness Policy Raikou that at +4 after Rocks damage, Signal Beam is able to take out the Tangrowth. And if you also look at Money Guy's team, his speed tiers are really weak, with his fastest mon being Mega Houndoom. Oh, this is after he made transactions, but before he made transactions, he had a Mega Houndoom and a Zelf and a Toxapex over Mega Garchomp, Starmie, Starmie, and something else that I don't remember. A Selkor, I think. No, he had a Selkor, right? No. Anyways, I don't really remember, but his speed tiers weren't that good, with his fastest mons being Houndoom and Azelf, which speed tied with Raikou, meaning that not only can they not beat my Calm Mind Raikou if I get up too many Spidefs, they also have the potential just to lose the speed tie against me and not be able to get off and revenge me at all. So as you can see here, the team that I brought is pretty standard in terms of lures. We have Gravity Earth Power Landers, which is like the most common bring VSA Celestial ever. And then we also have a Chople Incineroar. Like I said, berries are really important in the metagame. I think it was for like Focus Blast. Oh no, for the close combat on the Terrakion, because I didn't think he would risk a Stone Edge into my Incineroar. And as you can see here, I bought a really bulky Medicham set to be able to switch in on the Terrakion and bulk up and Drain Punch together up on the field. So I'm not gonna go too in depth. I'm just gonna show how like how my sets are able to kind of lure against or be able to beat Money's team in terms of like prep, because as you can see here. Oh yeah, that was Magician Klefki, by the way, in case you didn't know this. But yeah, as you can see here, he Earthquakes on my Raikou, and I'm able to clean up his team with my Thunderbolt. So the main things I want you to take away from this team is that I built around a specific sort of lure that I felt like had potential to sweep against the Money, and I bought 2 offensive mons and 3 defensive mons. So in this case, I also have a Magician Klefki because he had a Toxapex and he also had a Silver on his team. But yeah, I had a Silver on the team, and I really wanted to get off Defog. But here's the thing: Prankster nerf prevents me from defogging against the Houndoom, meaning that Houndoom is always a safe solution to my Klefki. So I decided to run Magician to be able to get off a guaranteed defog, and that means also I can Thunder Wave on his Houndoom as well. Palossand was my universal counter to the Terrakion, and Incineroar was a kind of lure towards the Terrakion as well, I believe. I'm not really sure, but yeah, as you can see, I kind of built my teams based on like the sort of offensive core and the defensive core, and like this sort of lure that's able to either weaken my opponent's team heavily, take out a gigantic threat on my opponent's team, or just straight up sweep my opponent's team in general. So the next thing that I want to talk about is sort of like analyzing teams and just sort of like speed creeping in general. So as you can see on a lot of my teams, I have these whack-ass EVs, and here's the main difference between EVing in Smogon and Draft League. In Smogon, you have 252 threads because you want to be able to capitalize on the entire metagame. But however, in sort of a Draft League format, you're able to look at your opponent's speed gaps very clearly, and you're able to determine how much speed you need to outspeed your opponent. So in this case, let's take an example. If your opponent has a Mega Aerodactyl and a Garchomp, and you have a Mega Lopunny, you're able to run a Adamant Mega Lopunny to take advantage of the fact that he has such a large speed gap between his fastest Pokemon and his second fastest Pokemon that you're able to run something like a Adamant Lopunny. However, there's also the term that Draft League players call aggressive speed creeping, in which case where your opponent would only creep a Adamant Lopunny or Adamant Max Speed Lopunny, meaning that if you were Jolly Lopunny, you would actually outspeed the Aerodactyl. So what I think about aggressively speed creeping is that it is not necessary. Like, I don't think aggressively speed creeping is a good thing unless that sort of like the extra damage on the Adamant Aerodactyl is really, really good against your opponent's team. Because aggressive speed creeping is really risky, because especially if you don't know the skill cap of your opponent, because you don't know how good your opponents are. They might just be running 252 spreads, so it's really risky, and I don't like it. I only run it if I know my opponent's good, and they would like aggressively speed creep, knowing that they don't need Jolly on their Aerodactyl, but that's beside the point here. So another thing that you have to consider is that you definitely don't want excessive EVs. So let's say I have a Medicham here, Landers here. I have 208 plus speed, which hits 319, which outsped, I believe, Terrakion on no, not Terrakion, what am I talking about? It outsped something on Money's team, but something hit 318 max speed on Money's team, and I ran 319 speed on Lando because I didn't need the extra speed. So extra bulk is always nice on your Pokemon, so always make sure not to like run too much speed onto unnecessary speed onto your Pokemon. But another option that you can also run is like bulky sets. So in this case, I run a bulky Medicham, and even though something offensively that outsped like if he had a base 100 and base 100 Pokemon, I could have speed tied it. There is you can you can think whether it's worth it or not to speed tie that Pokemon where you can have just more bulk, which is what I'm trying to state in this sort of like EVing. So EVing is already like a very deep concept, I believe, in Pokemon Draft League, and I'm not going to be able to go into it too deeply. But the main thing that I want to say is that when building defensive walls, you can always EV specific EVs into Spidef or defense to be able to take that extra damage or be able to guarantee to take that attack from a certain Pokemon after like certain hazard damage and etc. And you definitely want to keep in mind that look at the speed gaps between your opponent's team, because it is really important for you to realize that and be able to capitalize on that and realize whether you are able to bring Modest or Timid on your Pokemon. Finally, I want to go into like the sort of general terms of how team building works. So I'm going to give 2 examples of this. Was my League War game against Lejean and Turk. So the first game that I'm going to talk about is for Lejean's game. So looking at Lejean's team and my team, it looks really similar, right? Yeah. So the first thing that you want to notice is that that I noticed on Lejean's team is that he has no rock resist outside of his Bronzong, which is neutral from close combat. So that's the first thing I noticed. And because my Terrakion is T, that's the main Pokemon that I wanted to build around. So right now I'm just gonna go through like a couple of my builds and state that like what is like what is sort of the mentality that I went through when I built these teams. But to give you like an example on how I built. But Calm Mind, Shadow Ball are this was my second team, but I had Dazzling Gleam, I believe, before after the edit. But yeah, Calm Mind, Dazzling Gleam, Psychic, Alakazam. That beats everything on his team except for the Bronzong, and a Z-move Terrakion, which beats everything on his team at +2 except for Bronzong. So as you can see, these two kind of like wear each other's checks down very much, and that's sort of the offensive core that I decided to build around in this game. Next up, we have a Substitute Toxic Scald and Roar Suicune. This beats non-Flame Orb Milotic 1v1 and is able to help via stuff such as Sylveon as well and Mandibuzz as well. And Mandibuzz, as you can see, is going to be his only like main removal on this team, with his other being Landorus, which I believe would be more offensive than a defensive default set. So I really wanted to capitalize on that, therefore I built an Expert Belt HP Ice Rosary with a lot of special attack investment to be able to take out physically defensive Mandibuzzes upon switching on their default. So that is something that is also considered a lure, because normally you would just bring like regular Toxic Spikes defensive Rosary, then it can't really beat Mandibuzz because it has Overcoat and you can't Sleep Powder or Stun Spore it. So another Pokemon that you want to see is good against my team is going to be his own Alakazam. As you can see, I don't have a Psychic Resist outside of Krookodile and Kartana, but Kartana is going to drop the Psychic either way, and Krookodile dies to Focus Blast. So the main thing that you want to see here is going to be the most common counter to a Mega Alakazam, which is going to be a Scarf Pokemon. So Scarf, Crunch, Earthquake, Pursuit. I didn't run only Pursuit because you can also stay in on the Krookodile, predicting the Pursuit and just KOing me with a Focus Blast from there, because that happened to me before, where I stayed in on a Krookodile with a Alakazam and just took him out when he went for a Pursuit and I lived. So I also have Crunch as well in this set. As you can see, Chargy Zapdos to deal with the Terrakion. Also good pivot with Static. I'm able to get a power on a close combat potentially. But as you can see here, my Rosary comes into play greatly here, as I'm able to get up rocks into Terrakion, get up a SD. As I said, I got a free kill with this Terrakion, especially because he didn't actually bring his Bronzong the first game. And I'm able to pivot around with my Zapdos, as I said, letting up Toxic Spikes, and here's where my lure comes in. I got the HPI, so it does 59% to the Mandibuzz. and he is not able to stay in, meaning I'm able to get up a free layer of Toxic Spikes. I live the Stone Age with ease because he's Scarf and he only has a 2% chance of killing. And right here I'm able to go into my Crocodile, knock his Calm Mind Mega Alakazam, and if I only had Pursuit here, I would have probably just lost to this Mega Alakazam. But because I have Crunch, I'm able to take out the Alakazam. The crit didn't matter because even at -1 it does 86 min, and even if I didn't get the roll, he died to Toxic either way. So as you can see here, like, building good teams are really important in Pokemon Draft League. Because if you were to just bring regular defensive Roserade in this sort of matchup, you would never be able to. I would never have been able to break past the Mandibuzz that easily as I did in that match. So I'm gonna give one last example, and that is gonna be against Turk. And this is one of my sort of my example on good ass lure. So as you can see, we have a pretty mild, offensive team against Turk, and yeah, so Turk has a really threatening team in Tapu Koko, Luchacore, Mega Charizard X, and a lot of defensive mons as well. So the first thing I noticed was that definitely to be able to deal was the Harlucha and the Charizard X, that being their main threats on this team. So the sets that I came up with to combat these mons are Citrus Berry, Tapu Fini, and you might be thinking, why Citrus Berry? Why not Leftovers? Because when a Hawlucha goes for a +2 acrobatics, it's going to be around 60%. Meaning that if I were lefties, I would heal back up to 46% the next turn and die to a following acrobatics. However, if I were Citrus Berry, I would heal 25% in a single turn, and I would be able to live the next acrobatics. So that's sort of like the mentality that you want to have when building, is you see what sort of like unique ideas that you can come up with to be able to check your opponent's offensive mons. And next up we have a Roar Crocodile to prevent his Hawlucha from setting up too much. You definitely want to be able to prevent your opponent from being able to break past your team. Roar Crocodile is a great example in this case, because your opponent's going to think that your Crocodile cannot touch the Hawlucha and they can just freely set up on it. And here's my favorite set of this turn, of this match, which is going to be the Nature Power Roserade. Because if you look at the two Tapus on this team, it's going to be Tapu Koko and my Tapu Fini, meaning that a Roserade with Nature Power either turns into Thunderbolt or Moonblast, meaning that I'm able to OHKO the Hawlucha in both cases. So, hopping directly into the team, he actually brings a really cool Hawlucha set as well in this game, being the Sky Attack, Power Hug, SD, Limber Hawlucha. Because if you look at the team again, Turk is also a pretty good player. You can see that Hawlucha outspeeds my entire team even without a Unburden boost. Meaning that my main counters to this Hawlucha in his mind are going to be Thunder Wave, Prankster, Thunder DI, and then Stun Spore Roserade. So you brought a Limber Hawlucha vs me, which is a really cool set, and if I was Stun Spore over Nature Power on the Roserade, I would definitely have lost the game. But and that being said, he goes for the Sky Attack, and he goes for a 90. He gets a crit and flinches my Tapu Fini, which puts me in a terrible position straight away. So this is going to happen in a lot of your Draft League games as well, where you get hacks turn 1 and you're already put into a bad position, and your lure doesn't end up working as you intended. Therefore, in this case, I'm forced to go Crocodile, because what I noticed is that because he has Sky Attack, Acrobatics, and SD, he does not have a fighting coverage. He needs to be able to touch my Sundress, therefore he does not have a fighting coverage, and I'm able to freely go into my Crocodile on his Acrobatics and roar him out of here. Here I'm going to sack my Fini, get off a Defog with my Sundress on his Milotic Switching, and take out his Roserade with 2 Psychics. And right here, I go for the Nature Power into the Charizard, predicting the Hawlucha / Charizard, and then get off a Thunderbolt and pretty much OHKO both the Charizard, and with the Cobra Berry, I'm also able to OHKO the Hawlucha. So, the Cobra Berry was originally for the Braver Tapu Koko, but as you can see here, even though you have a bad matchup, in this case being me extremely weak to Tapu Koko, you're able to build sort of like lures against your opponent to be able to capitalize on this bad matchup, because building in Draft League is really dependent on creativity and sort of your not creativity, but like creativity is important, but like your analysis of the game and of the match beforehand. And I believe teams are like 80% like determine the matchup or determine the game in like 80% of the scenarios, because even if you play well, if you have a bad team build, you're also most likely to lose. Therefore, I believe that team building is one of the most fundamental and important parts of the draft league, which is why I decided to record this first. And as you can see here, I gave a lot of examples today in my videos on my own teams on how I was able to capitalize with lures and pretty much think of a game plan beforehand inside my mind to be able to beat my opponents. So if you were to take away anything from this video, and if you're even watching this video at this point anymore, the main thing I want you, if you're a new player, to think is that what is my opposition's team weak to, and what is something that I can build around and to beat my opponent, and what is the sort of like Pokemon that is good against me, and how can I beat them with lures or like with unconventional sets, or like that are like viable again in this matchup. So hope you all enjoyed this video. I definitely had a blast recording this because it was really fun to talk about like my previous teams, but this is going to be sort of like a mini series that I'm kind of thinking of doing to introduce like more sort of strategies in draft league format to new players. And if you did enjoy this video, do tell me and give me feedback, because if this doesn't get enough like feedback and not many people are like find this useful, I'm probably just not going to continue this series anymore. So if you enjoyed, definitely do leave a comment, because I'm interested in hearing what both new players and old veterans say about this video. And this is also my first time doing like an analysis video, so I'm sorry if I wasn't really articulate in my like explanations because I'm not Jolt, so I can't really like give you like a really detailed breakdown of how I do stuff. But hope you guys just took away something from this video, because that's really what I want, for new players to be able to emerge into the community and be able to sort of root themselves into this community without being like isolated away from others, and not being able to learn how to like play this format correctly, or not correctly, but like play this format like a lot of good players out there being like Gypsy and whatnot. So definitely attempt to find your own sort of building style, because a lot of people build like defensively and preservatively, where they want a counter to every Pokemon on your opponent's team, and some people build defensively. I'm kind of like a mixture of both. But yeah, definitely go ahead and give me a comment on how you felt about this video, and hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.